This is Chicago's Police Memorial, a tribute to the city's fallen officers. Shannon Spaulding may be alive, but her livelihood as a cop is utterly dead.
I mourn the loss of my job like a death. Most of my friends were police officers. I don't have police officer friends anymore. It has changed my life drastically and not for the better. And I will never be the same. But I am not going to lose everything for nothing.
She's emotionally wounded, suffering from PTSD and nightmares of being hunted and shot at, not by criminals, but by the crooked cops she exposed. Police talk about the thin blue line, that kind of commitment they share to protecting each other in the line of duty. But if a cop crosses that line by reporting a corrupt officer, that camaraderie vanishes. In fact, cross that line, and like Shannon Spaulding, you may just find a target on your back. From the moment she entered Police Training Academy in Chicago, Shannon Spaulding knew she'd picked the right job, even if some of the early lessons were troubling.
And you're walking into the academy, and here you are looking at your instructors with great respect, and you're eager to learn how to be the best cop ever. And one of the first things they're telling me is if an officer writes down, once upon a time this happened, I don't care what really happened, that's what happens once it's on the paper. And you don't say a word about it, or your career's over.
Spaulding spent most of her career in undercover work on Chicago's South Side, gathering information from informants about drug dealers and the like. And it was on the streets of Chicago's South Side that she began hearing over and over about one particular drug operation.
I discovered that there were police personnel, including supervisors, that were planting narcotics on innocent people and putting them in, falsely imprisoning them if they didn't want to pay a tax so that they could go free. They were also receiving regular payments from the drug dealers so that the drug dealers can operate their narcotics enterprise without fear of being prosecuted.
The police drug ring was centered here, in what was the Ida B. Wells public housing, a warren of rat-infested high-rises. It's since been torn down, but at the time, at least a dozen officers were involved in the ring. Leading it all, Sergeant Ronald B. Watts.
The corrupt officers are usually politically connected. They know someone in a high place. We say they're on a scholarship. So if they commit a crime, if they do something that violates the rules, they make a phone call. Then the paperwork that should discipline these officers is lost. It never happens.
Spaulding and her partner knew the rogue officers were protected internally, so they brought their information to an outside agency, the FBI, knowing the risk they were taking.
I was fully aware of what breaking the code of silence would do. Not only did I break the code of silence by reporting internal corruption with other officers, I crossed the thin blue line. I went to an outside agency, the FBI, which limited the Chicago Police Department's ability to cover up the corruption I was exposing. So I slapped them twice.
So began an undercover operation very few people at Chicago Police Headquarters knew about. For 3 years, Spaulding and her partner worked the streets of the South Side to gather evidence of police corruption, but it all came to an abrupt end in 2010. The undercover investigation was called Operation Brass Tacks. Brass referring to the bosses in the Chicago police force, Tacks referring to the tax they were collecting from drug dealers. Sometime in 2010, one of Spaulding's bosses, one of the very few who knew what she was actually up to, made a terrible mistake. He blew her cover.
So the moment that I realized that my cover had been compromised, It was as if I was free falling off the world's tallest building, knowing I had no parachute. The supervisors that should have been supporting me and who should have wanted the department to be ridden of these criminal rogue officers were the same officials that were going to the rank and file saying, don't work with her, don't trust her, you can't trust her, she's putting other officers in prison, you could be the next one.
Where's that cop?
Any cop anywhere will tell you when you're sent out to make an arrest, you need to know you can count on backup from other officers if trouble develops. It can determine whether you come home alive or not. That kind of backup was no longer available to Spaulding and her partner.
It's me, my partner, and 2 radios. The supervisor told me one day, the team is not going to back you up on the street, and I would hate to be the one to knock on your door and tell your daughter you're coming home in a box.
The 2 officers were kicked out of the organized crime unit and assigned to a series of dead-end jobs. Then, one day, on the rooftop of the police garage as Spaulding prepared to leave, a chilling warning from her boss.
And he said, you need to wear your bulletproof vest coming and going from your personal car, arriving and leaving work, because if one of these bosses, and he named names, could take a shot at you across the parking lot, they hate you so much, they will. Trust me, wear your vest. You're in danger, and we can't protect you.
Spaulding and her partner tried to get authorities inside Chicago police to investigate the threats against their lives, but her bosses refused. So, backs against the wall, they took a chance and contacted a former cop.
Pete Kokonis started his career with Chicago police as an undercover cop, just as Spaulding had. By the time he retired, he held a senior post inside the Internal Affairs Division investigating police corruption. And he had a reputation for sticking up for the underdog.
I met with her a few times and I interviewed her, and basically I interrogated her like I would anybody else. And I asked her the same question different ways. I got the same answer every time. I got the A to B to C to D. She never wavered. If this was a Hollywood movie, it would be like Training Day with Denzel Washington, the most ridiculous movie I ever saw about policemen. I mean, and, you know, they're turning a cop corrupt in 5 minutes. I wouldn't believe this kind of stuff would happen. But after 4 or 5 meetings, these 2 kids, it was so complicated that it would be impossible to make it up. You just couldn't make up stuff like this.
Kokonis agreed to advise the pair on how to fight back, and they needed it because, predictably, Chicago police circled the wagons. Over at the FBI headquarters, Operation Brass Tacks got downsized. Of the many officers investigated, only 2 were charged, Sergeant Ronald Watts and his second-in-command, Khalid Muhammad. In the end, they were sentenced to less than 2 years.
It was a very large investigation. It should have had at least a dozen individuals within the department go to jail for approximately 30 years. And I say to the chief, why can't you go after these individuals? He says to me, because I made deals with the devil. And how in the hell am I going to explain knowing about this corruption or these officers' actions for over a decade without landing myself in federal prison?
NBC5 investigates. Is the Chicago Police Department punishing, even endangering, 2 of its own?
Those are the allegations in a lawsuit.
Fearing
filed
what
by
the
2
rogue
current
cops
police
might
officers
do to
who say
silence
they
them,
just want to
Spaulding and her
prove
partner filed a whistleblower's lawsuit against the Chicago police. They hoped it would protect them. They were wrong.
You know, here my partner and I are on the media. We're on the 10 o'clock news. We're on the news. We're splashed all over every station. We're on the front page of the newspaper the next day. And we have to walk in to work and actually go to work and report to the bosses we have just filed a lawsuit against. They were so furious. They were so furious. And the retaliation that was covert and open at the same time was no longer covert. It was completely open.
5 months after Spaulding and her partner filed their whistleblower suit, police hit back, filing a lawsuit against them. The charge, illegally recording police, a federal crime.
I was detained, I was arrested, and I was told during this time that it could all disappear if I dropped my lawsuit. It'll all go away. But if you want to put Chicago police officers in jail, we can put you in federal prison. We'll see how you like it. What grounds? How can you do this to me? You have no evidence. Do you know what I was told? If top official bosses from the police department say you're guilty and you did this, we will make you guilty and you will go to prison.
Police dropped the charges, but the very next day, Shannon Spaulding applied for a medical leave of absence. In 2014, she turned in her badge and gun.
It is going to affect me every day for the rest of my life because this is the job I loved. This was my heart and soul. And they took it from me. I was a really great cop. I did really good work. And because I chose to break the code of silence and do what every officer has the right to do, what every officer is sworn to do, because I upheld my oath. I was hung out at high noon in front of all the officers and made an example out of.
A lot of the people that were involved in this harassment and this striking back at her have moved on to other places in law enforcement. There should have been an investigation instituted immediately, and these guys should have been investigated and either suspended or removed from this department. But nobody did anything. They figured, we'll give her some money and she'll go away and that'll be the end of it. That's not how it's supposed to work.
Alan, attorneys for the city say this case was not about the code of silence.
In May 2016, the day the whistleblower suit was set to go to court, police settled the case for $2 million. After lawyers' bills and taxes get paid, Spaulding and her partner will each be left with a couple years' salary. And for Spaulding, a new focus.
This is no longer an investigation for me. It is a cause. Because I want to make sure that I never, ever see another officer walk in my shoes. I want to make sure that departments, not only in Chicago, but across the nation, in Canada, that they honor whistleblowers, that they uphold them as heroes and not villainize them and make them the criminals and ostracize them and you know, put the fear into them that they can't come forward. That has to stop.
It is a call for police to remember. The thin blue line represents officers standing to serve and protect, even when that line gets blurry. Duncan McHugh, CBC News, Chicago.